I sat in my chair, staring at the large sum of cash on the table in front of me. It was $80,000, a small fortune that I had been saving for years. I had been hiding it from my grandson, who had ignored me for 9 long years. I thought back to the day my grandson was born. I had been so proud, so happy to finally have a grandchild. But as he grew older, he began to drift away from me. He would rarely visit, and when he did, he was always distant, always preoccupied. I tried to reach out to him, to reconnect with him. But he just pushed me away. He said I was too old-fashioned, too out of touch. He said I didn't understand him, didn't understand the world he lived in. But I did understand him. I understood that he was struggling, that he was trying to find his place in the world. And I wanted to help him, to support him. But he just wouldn't let me. And then, one day, he found out about the money. He had been snooping around my house, looking for something to sell. And he found the cash, hidden away in a drawer. He demanded that I give him the money, that I hand it over to him. He said it was his, that he deserved it. But I refused. I told him that the money was mine, that I had worked hard for it. He got angry, very angry. He said I was selfish, that I didn't care about him. He said I was just a cheap old man, that I didn't want to help him. But I did want to help him. I just didn't want to give him the money. And then, he made a shocking threat. He said that if I didn't give him the money, he would never speak to me again. He said he would cut me out of his life, that he would never forgive me. I was torn between my love for him and my anger towards his entitlement. "You're just like your mother," I said, but he just sneered and said, "You're just a cheap old man." I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to respond. All I knew was that I had to protect myself, to protect my money. But as I sat there, staring at the cash, I couldn't help but feel a sense of sadness. I was sad that it had come to this, that my grandson and I were at odds. I was sad that I had to choose between my love for him and my desire to protect myself. But most of all, I was sad that I didn't know what the future held. Would my grandson follow through on his threat? Would he really cut me out of his life? I didn't know, but I was determined to find out. I was determined to stand up for myself, to protect my money and my dignity. And so, I made a decision. I decided to stand my ground, to refuse my grandson's demands and protect my money. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I was determined to do what I thought was right. I looked my grandson straight in the eye and said, "I'm not giving you the money. It's mine, and I've worked hard for it." My grandson's face turned red with anger, and he took a step closer to me. "You're making a big mistake," he said, his voice low and menacing. "I'll never speak to you again if you don't give me that money." I stood my ground, even though my heart was racing with fear. "I'm willing to take that risk," I said, trying to sound calmer than I felt. My grandson's eyes narrowed, and he sneered at me. "Fine," he said. "If that's how you want to play it, then so be it. But don't come crying to me when you're lonely and old, and you realize that you've lost your only grandson." With that, he turned and stormed out of the room, leaving me feeling shaken and scared. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew that I had to be prepared for anything. Over the next few days, I noticed that my grandson was spreading rumors about me around town. People would come up to me and whisper things like, "I heard you're a cheapskate," or "I heard you're stingy." It was clear that my grandson was trying to turn people against me, to make them think that I was a bad person. But I didn't let it get to me. I knew that I was doing the right thing, and that my grandson was just trying to manipulate me. I stood my ground and refused to give in to his demands, no matter how hard he tried to pressure me. As the days turned into weeks, the tension between us continued to build. My grandson would show up at my house unannounced, demanding to know why I wouldn't give him the money. I would tell him that it was none of his business, and that he needed to leave me alone. But he wouldn't leave me alone. He would call me constantly, leaving threatening messages on my answering machine. He would show up at my workplace, causing a scene and trying to embarrass me in front of my colleagues. I started to feel like I was under siege, like my grandson was waging a war against me. I didn't know how much more of this I could take, but I was determined to stand my ground. One day, I came home from work to find that my grandson had broken into my house. He had rummaged through my drawers and cabinets, looking for the money. But I had anticipated this move, and I had hidden the money in a safe place. I was furious when I saw the state of my house, but I tried to remain calm. I knew that I had to think clearly and come up with a plan to deal with my grandson's behavior. I decided to call the police and report the break-in. When they arrived, they took a statement from me and promised to look into the matter. But I knew that it wouldn't be easy to catch my grandson in the act, and that I would have to be patient. As the days turned into weeks, I continued to feel like I was living in a state of siege. My grandson's behavior was becoming more and more erratic, and I didn't know what he was capable of. I started to vary my routine, taking different routes to work and changing my schedule. I didn't want to make it easy for my grandson to find me, to confront me. But despite my best efforts, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I would catch glimpses of someone lurking in the shadows, and I would feel a chill run down my spine. I knew that I had to do something to protect myself, but I didn't know what. I felt like I was trapped in a nightmare, and I didn't know how to wake up. As the tension continued to build, I started to feel like I was losing my grip on reality. I was constantly looking over my shoulder, waiting for my grandson to strike. I knew that I had to find a way to deal with him, to put an end to this toxic situation. But I didn't know what to do, and I felt like I was running out of options. As I lay in bed that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that my grandson was planning something. I didn't know what it was, but I knew that it wouldn't be good. I tried to go to sleep, but my mind was racing. I kept thinking about all the things that could go wrong, all the ways that my grandson could hurt me. And then, just as I was starting to drift off to sleep, I heard a noise outside my window. It was a faint scratching sound, like someone was trying to get my attention. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. I knew that I had to be careful, that I couldn't let my grandson get the best of me. I slowly got out of bed and approached the window, my senses on high alert. And that's when I saw him, lurking in the shadows like a predator. My grandson was watching me, waiting for me to make a move. And I knew that I had to be careful, that I couldn't let him get the upper hand. I took a deep breath and tried to think clearly, but my mind was racing. I didn't know what to do, and I felt like I was running out of options. And then, just as I was trying to come up with a plan, I heard a noise behind me. It was a faint creaking sound, like someone was coming up the stairs. I spun around, my heart pounding in my chest. And that's when I saw her, standing in the doorway with a look of concern on her face. It was my daughter, my grandson's mother. And I knew that she was about to tell me something that would change everything. My daughter's eyes were filled with a mixture of worry and concern as she took in the scene before her. She saw me standing by the window, my eyes fixed on something outside, and she knew that something was wrong. "Dad, what's going on?" she asked, her voice soft but urgent. I hesitated for a moment, unsure of how much to reveal. But then I saw the genuine concern in her eyes, and I knew that I could trust her. "It's your son," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "He's been threatening me, trying to get me to give him money. And now he's outside my window, watching me." My daughter's face went pale, and she took a step forward. "Oh no, Dad," she said. "I had no idea. I'll talk to him, I'll make him leave you alone." I shook my head, feeling a sense of frustration. "It's not that easy," I said. He's not listening to reason. And I'm starting to feel like I'm in danger. My daughter's eyes widened, and she took another step forward. We'll get a restraining order, she said. We'll make sure he can't come near you. But as she spoke, I saw a figure move out of the shadows outside. My grandson was still there, watching me. And I knew that he wasn't going to give up easily. My daughter followed my gaze, and she saw her son standing outside. She gasped, and then she turned to me. I'll go talk to him, she said. I'll make him leave you alone. I nodded, feeling a sense of relief. Maybe, just maybe, my daughter could get through to her son. Maybe she could make him see sense. My daughter went outside, and I watched as she approached her son. They stood talking for a few minutes, their voices low and urgent. And then my grandson turned and walked away, disappearing into the night. My daughter came back inside, looking relieved. He's gone, she said. He won't bother you again. But I knew that I couldn't trust my grandson. I knew that he was capable of anything. And as I looked at my daughter, I saw a shadow of doubt in her eyes. She didn't believe me, I realized. She didn't think that her son was capable of hurting me. And in that moment, I felt a sense of despair. I knew that I was on my own, that I couldn't rely on my daughter to protect me. I was trapped in a nightmare, and I didn't know how to wake up. As the night wore on, I couldn't shake the feeling that my grandson was still out there, watching me. I kept looking over my shoulder, expecting to see him lurking in the shadows. And then, just as I was starting to drift off to sleep, I heard a noise outside. It was a faint scratching sound, like someone was trying to get my attention. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. And then I saw a piece of paper on the floor, pushed under the door. It was a note, written in my grandson's handwriting. You'll pay for what you did, it said. You'll pay for not giving me the money. I felt a chill run down my spine as I read the words. I knew that I was in grave danger, and I didn't know how to protect myself. I looked at my daughter, who was sleeping in the next room. I knew that I had to wake her up, to tell her about the note. But as I turned to go to her room, I heard a faint creaking sound. It was the sound of the front door opening, slowly and quietly. And I knew that my grandson was back, that he had come to make good on his threat. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. I knew that I had to act fast, to protect myself and my daughter. I slowly turned around, trying not to make any noise, and crept towards the front door. I peeked through the peephole, and my worst fears were confirmed. My grandson was standing outside, his eyes fixed on the door with a menacing glare. I knew that I had to get my daughter, to get her to safety. I crept back to her room, trying not to make any noise, and shook her awake. "What's wrong?" she asked, groggily opening her eyes. "It's your son," I whispered urgently. "He's outside, and he's not alone. We have to get out of here, now." My daughter's eyes widened, and she quickly sat up. "What do you mean he's not alone?" she asked, her voice trembling. I hesitated, unsure of how to answer. "I don't know," I admitted. "But I think he's brought someone with him. We have to get out of here, now." My daughter nodded, and we quickly got out of bed. We crept towards the back door, trying not to make any noise. As we reached the door, I slowly turned the handle and peeked outside. The coast was clear, and we quickly slipped out into the night. We ran as fast as we could, not stopping until we were blocks away from my house. Finally, we slowed down, gasping for breath. "What do we do now?" my daughter asked, looking around nervously. I shook my head. "I don't know," I admitted. "But we can't go back to my house. It's not safe." My daughter nodded, and we started walking again. We walked for hours, not stopping until the sun started to rise. Finally, we reached a small motel on the outskirts of town. We checked in, exhausted, and collapsed onto the bed. As we lay there, trying to catch our breath, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. I kept looking over my shoulder, expecting to see my grandson or one of his friends lurking in the shadows. But there was no one there. Finally, I drifted off to sleep, exhausted. But my rest was short-lived. Just as I was starting to relax, I was jolted awake by a loud knock at the door. I sat up, my heart pounding in my chest. "Who is it?" I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. There was no answer. Instead, the knocking grew louder, more insistent. I knew that I had to open the door, to see who it was. But I was scared of what I might find. I slowly got out of bed, my heart pounding in my chest. I approached the door, my hand trembling as I reached for the handle. And then, just as I was about to open the door, I heard a voice. "Grandpa," the voice said, low and menacing. "I know you're in there." I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. It was my grandson, and he was not alone. I stood frozen, my hand still on the door handle. My grandson's voice sent a chill down my spine, and I knew that I had to be careful. I looked around the room, trying to think of a way to escape. But there was no way out. We were trapped. My daughter, who had been sleeping, sat up in bed and rubbed her eyes. "What's going on?" she asked, looking around the room in confusion. "It's your son," I whispered, trying to keep my voice steady. "He's outside, and he's not alone." My daughter's eyes widened, and she quickly got out of bed. "What do we do?" she asked, looking around the room frantically. I shook my head, trying to think of a plan. But before I could come up with anything, my grandson spoke again. "Grandpa, I know you're in there. You can't hide from me forever." His voice was low and menacing, and I knew that he was not going to give up easily. I looked around the room again, trying to think of a way to escape. But there was no way out. We were trapped. My daughter and I looked at each other, and I knew that we had to do something. We couldn't just sit there and wait for my grandson to break down the door. We had to take action. I slowly turned the handle and opened the door, just a crack. My grandson's face was twisted in a snarl, and he was standing in the hallway with two large men. "Well, well, well," he said, his voice dripping with malice. "Look what we have here." The old man and his precious daughter, all alone and defenseless. I stood tall, trying to look brave. But inside, I was shaking with fear. My daughter stood beside me, her eyes fixed on her son with a mixture of fear and anger. "What do you want?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. My grandson sneered at me. "I want the money, of course. And I'm not leaving until I get it." I shook my head, trying to stall for time. "I don't have any money," I lied. My grandson's face turned red with rage, and he took a step closer to me. "Don't lie to me," he spat. "I know you have it. And I'm going to get it, no matter what it takes." I stood my ground, trying to look brave. But inside, I was terrified. I knew that my grandson was capable of anything, and I was scared of what he might do. My daughter stood beside me, her eyes fixed on her son with a mixture of fear and anger. "Stop this," she said, her voice firm. "You're not going to hurt your grandfather." My grandson sneered at her. "You can't stop me," he said. "I'm going to get what I want, no matter what it takes." And with that, he pushed his way into the room, his two friends following close behind. I stood frozen, unsure of what to do. My daughter stood beside me, her eyes fixed on her son with a mixture of fear and anger. We were trapped, and I knew that we were in grave danger. My grandson's eyes scanned the room, searching for any sign of the money. His friends, two large and menacing men, stood behind him, their eyes fixed on me with a mixture of curiosity and hostility. I knew that I had to think fast, to come up with a plan to get us out of this situation. But my mind was a blank, and I couldn't think of anything. My daughter, however, seemed to be thinking clearly. She took a step forward, her eyes fixed on her son with a mixture of anger and fear. "Stop this," she said, her voice firm. "You're not going to hurt your grandfather." My grandson sneered at her. "You can't stop me," he said. "I'm going to get what I want, no matter what it takes." And with that, he took a step closer to me, his eyes fixed on me with a mixture of greed and hostility. I stood my ground, trying to look brave. But inside, I was terrified. I knew that my grandson was capable of anything, and I was scared of what he might do. My daughter stood beside me, her eyes fixed on her son with a mixture of fear and anger. She seemed to be thinking, trying to come up with a plan to get us out of this situation. And then, suddenly, she spoke. "I'll give you the money," she said, her voice firm. My grandson's eyes lit up with excitement, and he took a step closer to her. "Where is it?" he asked, his voice eager. My daughter hesitated, and I knew that she was trying to stall for time. "I'll get it," she said, finally. "But you have to promise me that you'll leave us alone." My grandson nodded, his eyes fixed on my daughter with a mixture of greed and hostility. "I promise," he said. "Just get the money." My daughter nodded, and then she turned to me. "Dad, can you get the money?" she asked, her voice firm. I hesitated, unsure of what to do. But then I nodded, and I turned to get the money. I knew that I had to think fast, to come up with a plan to get us out of this situation. And then, suddenly, I had an idea. I would give my grandson the money, but I would also call the police. I would make sure that he was arrested, and that he couldn't hurt us again. I smiled to myself, feeling a sense of relief. I knew that I had a plan, and that we would be safe. But as I turned to get the money, I saw something that made my heart sink. My grandson's friends were moving closer, their eyes fixed on me with a mixture of hostility and greed. And I knew that they were not going to let us get out of this situation alive. I stood frozen, my heart sinking as I realized the true extent of my grandson's plan. His friends, two large and menacing men, were moving closer, their eyes fixed on me with a mixture of hostility and greed. I knew that I had to act fast, to protect myself and my daughter. But before I could do anything, my grandson spoke up. "No," he said, his voice cold and calculating. "I don't think so, Grandpa. You're not going to call the police. You're not going to escape that easily." His friends moved closer, their hands reaching out to grab me. I tried to struggle, but I was no match for them. They pinned me to the wall, holding me in place as my grandson approached me. "You should have given me the money when I asked for it," he said, his eyes blazing with anger. "Now, you're going to pay the price." I felt a surge of fear as my grandson reached into his pocket and pulled out a knife. I knew that I was in grave danger, and that I might not make it out of this situation alive. But then, just as my grandson was about to strike, the door burst open and the police rushed in. "Freeze!" one of the officers shouted, his gun drawn. My grandson's eyes widened in surprise as he realized he had been caught. His friends released me, and I fell to the ground, gasping for breath. The police rushed over to me, helping me to my feet and leading me to safety. As I looked back, I saw my grandson being handcuffed and read his rights. He was finally going to face the consequences of his actions. I felt a surge of relief and satisfaction, knowing that justice had been served. My daughter came over to me, tears streaming down her face. "I'm so sorry, Dad," she said, her voice shaking. "I had no idea he was capable of this." I hugged her tightly, feeling a sense of gratitude and love. "It's not your fault," I said. "He's been manipulative and controlling for years. But now, he's finally going to pay for what he's done." As we watched, my grandson was led away in handcuffs, his eyes filled with anger and hatred. I knew that I would never have to worry about him again, and that I could finally find peace. The police officer came over to me, a smile on his face. "You're safe now," he said. "You and your daughter are safe." I nodded, feeling a sense of gratitude and relief. "Thank you," I said. "Thank you for saving us." The officer nodded, his eyes filled with compassion. "You're welcome," he said. "We're just glad we were able to get here in time." As I looked at my daughter, I felt a sense of closure and satisfaction. We had finally found justice, and we could finally move on with our lives. We hugged each other tightly, feeling a sense of love and gratitude. "We're safe now," I said, my voice shaking with emotion. "We're finally safe."